Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody always asks why, I'm here to ask, why not? I'll be breaking down the mindsets of guests as well as my own in a bid to find out what makes people say, why not? Hello guys and welcome back to Why Not? So, interview today with Bex Brame. This is a really interesting episode as we actually talk about her own previous experiences and constant dieting. Also, she was into a little bit of over exercise, and so if it might be something you don't realise, you may not be dieting per se, or it could be actually be over exercising. So we talk about restriction and how to bring people into intuitive eating and just how much and how freeing it is. But as ever guys, and enjoy my podcast with Bex Brame. So Bex is an intuitive health coach. So she specialises in helping women get out of the diet cycle and break diet culture for good. I want you guys to sit back and relax or walk and listen and Hi guys and welcome back to Why Not podcast. So today I have got Bex Brame, who is an intuitive health coach. So today we are going to talk all about how to get rid of diet culture and diet mentality out of your head. So welcome to the podcast, Bex. How are you?
Really well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a health coach. My background, actually, I have a commercial background like many people. I always worked in food and I loved being around food. So I started off just waitressing and then went to university to study hospitality, kind of just because I went to a school where they told you about university and nothing else. Like I wasn't ever given a choice of anything else.
We were told that as well.
Exactly. But I always, because I enjoyed being around food and I enjoyed waitressing, I was like, I'll just go and study hospitality. And I had to do a year abroad as part of that degree. So that appealed to me as well. And then I kind of worked my way up the ranks in the corporate hospitality world. So latterly ending my career in contract catering, so working in the catering departments for hotels, hospitals, schools, universities, that kind of thing, which was amazing because it meant I got to work in the industry that I loved, but more of a kind of Monday to Friday 9 to 5. So that was really great. And then I had just started a new job when COVID hit in March 2020. And of course, it was a situation of first one in, last one out. So I was made redundant after 10 weeks. But actually, it was a complete blessing because I've been wanting to move into kind of a fitness, health, nutrition kind of space for a while, but I wasn't entirely sure how to do that in my job. Like I had considered becoming a personal trainer because I really enjoy exercise and working out, but I was like, you know what, I've done more than my fair share of late nights, early starts, weekend working when I was waitressing. So I kind of ruled that out. And then I thought maybe I'll become a dietitian or a nutritionist, but actually the job that I had before, I was in a hospital and I worked really closely with the dietitians. And whilst they did an amazing job, I realized that wasn't kind of the route I wanted to go down. And also, I don't have any kind of science background as far back as GCSEs really. So I would have had to go back to do like science A levels and then go on to university. And who has the kind of time or energy or mentality to do that? And then I came across coaching and it kind of just fit all the bills for me. I'd never heard of a health coach before. It's big in America, but only growing slowly now in the UK. But it just seemed to tick all the boxes when I was reading about it, like this way of supporting people in their health and wellness and their lifestyle from a very much holistic perspective through their own goals. It really ticked all the boxes for me. So I enrolled at IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that was that really. And then suddenly here I am building up a business. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Oh, that's brilliant. What brought you to the kind of diet element of it?
So I suffered from eating disorders as a teenager and in my early 20s. And whilst I was really, really lucky to have excellent clinical support, and the support of like my parents, and from a clinical perspective, I recovered. Like I was no longer classified as having an eating disorder, but that spurred me, as is so common, into years of disordered eating. So I was obsessed with my weight, with my body. I was always on some kind of diet, you know, like the Special K diet or the paleo diet or the Cambridge plan, like you name it, I was doing it. And I was kind of convinced, I always had thought in my head that I was slightly bigger than what I wanted to be, you know, even as far back, I went to a boarding school, so I was around girls, and from the age of 11 we were all living together, you know, sharing dormitories and things, and I was always convinced in my head that I was bigger than the others, even though if you look back at photos of like 12-year-old me now, you would never pick me out in a lineup. So I don't know what caused me to have that mentality. But yeah, I was obsessed with my body and with losing weight and being smaller, and that was not only through food but also through exercise as well. You know, I was exercising to the point of obsession, classes every single night, running to work, going to the gym, and I was convinced, you know, if I missed one workout, that would be it, like I'd get fat. And that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear was that I would get fat. So I then had I had a bit of a wake-up call when it was about 4 or 5 years ago now. I was living in London at the time, and I used to cycle like on my bike to and from work. And I had a really nasty accident on the way home from work one evening. Came off my bike, middle of the road, lying there. I could tell I'd done myself a lot of damage. I could see the blood pouring from my face. And my first thought was, I'm going to get fat.
Oh, God.
And I just thought, like, this is not, that was actually my second thought. My first thought was, how much damage have I done to my face? But my second thought was, I'm going to get fat, because in my head, I knew I wouldn't be anywhere near a gym for however long. And I just thought, like, I cannot live like this. This is not okay, you know. And I'm actually a massive believer in, like, everything happens for a reason. And turned out I'd broken my shoulder and done a number of other kind of minor injuries. I couldn't go to a gym for the best part of 3 or 4 months. And nothing happened. Like, I was fine, you know. If anything, I probably had a well-needed rest. And it was a massive wake-up call for me, where I realized, you know, you don't have to live your life like this. Like, there is more to life than obsessing over your body. So that kind of informed the work that I'm doing now, because I just realized how many other, and I mainly work with women, so how many other women's lives are just dictated by this idea of being too fat or not happy because of their weight. And it really is, it takes over everything, like thoughts of food, thoughts of your body. It can really take over your life. So the idea of being able to help people move past that in the same way, well, hopefully a slightly less dramatic way, I'm not about to kind of like push them off their bikes, that is kind of informed the work I'm doing now.
Yeah, no, like I suppose something like that, a big event like that, goes kind of like shift your perspective a little bit as well, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
So you're trying to do it without the, like, you know, bike part,
Yeah.
as you said, without shoving them off their bike. But if they're really difficult,
Yeah, it's always there as an option.
yeah, if you really want me to, we can reel in mine. Can you explain the term diet, actually?
Yeah, of course. So diet, to me, diet is any form of restriction or controlling, predominantly food, but you can also diet kind of through exercise as well. You know, like I mentioned, I was completely obsessed with getting in the exercise. So anything that controls, restricts, forces you to eat in a certain way, move in a certain way, which you're not in control of. You know, you're looking to a plan or an app or a book to tell you what to eat and when to eat it. Anything like that I would consider to be a diet.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, putting in the exercise in it. Do you think people realize how much they rely on exercise, or they can over exercise.
Exactly, you know, like just because you might feel like you've got you know, I was a classic, from the outside people thought I was super healthy. During the week, you know, I was eating all the like healthy foods, you know, the green smoothies and the kale salads, and I was doing all this exercise, so people thought, you know, she's just super healthy, she must be in great shape. But actually mentally I was a mess, because this was like taking over everything. So I think putting in the exercise, it's another way of controlling yourself. And if you're exercising, you know this better than me, I'm sure, but if you're exercising to a point where you're causing harm to your body or strain, or you're not listening to your body when you need to rest, for example, that can be just as harmful as restricting or controlling your food.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think overtraining is a big thing, that like also using exercise as punishment. That's another
Exactly.
thing, like, oh, I ate an extra chocolate bar, I'm gonna have to run for an extra 10 minutes or something today, you know. No, you don't.
Exactly. Like this idea of like earn and burn your calories. Either I'm going to earn them by doing some like crazy HIIT workout in the morning and then I get to go and eat, or like, oh my gosh, I had cake this afternoon in the office, so I need to go and burn off 500 calories. You know, that was a mentality I held for a long, long time.
Yeah, there was a big trend as well for on social media for a while. It was like, you know, oh, this cookie, you would have to do 300 burpees to burn off this cookie. It's like, yeah, but like you could also be happy and eat the cookie.
Yeah. It's not helpful in any way. This mentality of like fear mongering anything
Mm.
is super unhelpful, and yet we see it on social media all the time. And you know, in newspapers, in the media, even on a slow news day, they love cracking out at like, yeah, how many miles do you need to run to eat this Mars bar? Like, no.
Do you think the media and kind of social media have a lot to blame for the diet culture issue we have?
Oh, massively. I mean, I'm so grateful that, like, I'm 34, so social media didn't exist when I was growing up and going kind of through my teenage years. Thank goodness, because I honestly don't know how, especially like, I think when you're going through puberty as a young girl, you're so impressionable, you're so vulnerable. If you're then add kind of social media on top of that, where you're seeing these so-called perfect images of perfect bodies, and if that doesn't look like you automatically think, well, I'm wrong, or there's something wrong with me. Add on top of that, you know, the bullying and the hate that can come with social media, but that's a total other story. So I do think social media can be a wonderful place, but it can be a really dangerous place as well. So and that's where I think we all have a responsibility to curate our feed to something that makes us happy and makes us feel joy. But if you don't understand that, and you're maybe quite vulnerable to messages, then that's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, very true. Actually, I've had this conversation once or twice recently, and I literally thought the diet culture stuff was going away. And then I realized I only follow people who talk about science-based stuff, balance, all that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, it's still there. It pops up every so often. But the reason I don't get it is because I have my social media feed curated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think as well though, you said you're 34. Like I'm 30, so like Facebook has only started becoming a thing when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
But we grew up in the time when like size zero, remember? Like
Mm-hmm.
everything was scrutinized,
Heroin
like, you
chic.
know, the lower and like, you know, if you were a normal weight. So I think that kind of feeds into the obsession, even without social media. I think there's a lot of girls, like myself included, I was like that when I was younger. I was like, why don't I have a thigh gap? Like that kind of
Yeah,
thing. Um,
absolutely.
do you see a lot of that with clients now? Like people say maybe our age who are kind of still stuck in that mindset.
I wouldn't say there's the mindset so much of being super skinny anymore. I think the ideal body type has changed a little, and it's now more like curvy, but curvy in the right places, and the kind of strong, not skinny. But generally I generally work with clients anywhere between 30 and 60.
Okay.
And they usually come to me and it's just this mentality of I need to lose weight. It's not like I need to be a certain shape, it's I need to lose weight.
Yeah. I think at that one I get that a lot as well. They don't want the size 0 anymore. I find people say my age in the gym, but they want to be skinny.
Yeah, and or like toned, and it's like, you know, the J-Lo Kardashian kind of curves, but only in the right places kind of idea.
Yeah, but we don't want to lift the heavy weights because we'll get bulky. You'd be surprised how much that is still a thing. I got asked that question recently, and I was like, "Do I look bulky?" No. Yeah, well, I just squatted my body weight yesterday. Oh.
Yeah, I must admit, like I was massively thinking that for a long time. Like I used to do all the like Kayla Itzin's BBG guide, like 20 minutes of high intensity workouts every day, but never ever touch a dumbbell. Like just madness, literally madness when I think about it now.
Actually, you know those months when you were off and you couldn't train, how did that affect? Did that like affect how you looked at while you were eating or stuff like that? Or did you just kind of go, I'm just going to recover?
Do you know, I tried really hard. I think it really helped. For one, I came back to my parents' house and was looked after by my parents, which I think is helpful because, and I know that I'm so lucky to be in this position, but I think it's because we all went to boarding school at 11, so I never had the like awkward teenage years at home with my parents. So we're a really close family, and whenever we come home, even to the point of now, it's like my mum wants to look after us. She wants to like make us dinners and cook for us and take care of us. So I think in a way I didn't have the choice, you know. There's no way I could be at home to my mum and dad's and not eat dinner, whereas if I'd been at my flat in London, it would have been very easy and very tempting to think, oh, you know, well, I've not done any exercise, so I'm going to skip my meal or something like that. But because I was at home with my mum and dad, that just wasn't an option to me. So I think that was a bit of a blessing in a way. And then as the kind of weeks went on and I could see that nothing, like my body was, if you look at pictures, I actually look quite skinny after the accident, and it's because I lost my muscle mass, because at the time I was quite into lifting weights and things. So I guess I must have lost quite a bit of muscle. But I then, as the recovery went on, I realized like I wanted to get outside and go for a walk because I knew that the fresh air would make me feel better. And it stopped being about exercise to control your body, and it started being like, well, what's going to make you feel better, you know? Like I diligently did my physio because I wanted my shoulder to be better, because I wanted to be able to go back to swimming, which I always really enjoyed. I wanted to get the mobility back more than, I guess for the first time I was having to do some sort of, I mean, it was physio, but it was exercise. I was having to do it from a recovery perspective as opposed to from an aesthetic perspective. And it kind of made me realize that actually, you know, there's more to working out than just burning calories. Like this is good for your body and good for your mental energy as well, not just burn the calories.
Yeah, that's a massive mindset shift.
Huge.
It must have been so freeing as well, like.
Definitely. I think having that realization, because previously, like I worked in London in Canary Wharf, which is super sociable, especially in the summer, like not every night, but often it'd be like, let's go for a drink after work, or we'll go grab some food. And if I had a class on, which I did like the majority of the time, I would be like, no, I'm not going to go. Like I need to get to my class, or I need to do this. But suddenly having this, like, you know what, you'll be fine. If you don't go to body pump one night a week, you'll be absolutely fine, you know, it will be okay. And it really did kind of wake me up to realize that I can be a bit more spontaneous. I don't need to be so disciplined and so regimented, and realizing that actually what I thought that was adding to my life, it was actually detracting from a lot of other aspects of my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's actually a sorry, a guy I follow on Instagram, and he was saying like, oh, people be like, oh, that's unhealthy, that's healthy. And he's like, I could argue the pizza and a few beers with my friends could be very healthy. I haven't seen them in ages and I want to see them.
Totally. I think, and that's what I'm very much kind of learning more now, is like the social indicators of health. Not just, I think if you'd said to me a couple of years ago, what is health? I'd have been like, well, it's exercise and the food you eat. But actually, the more I study and the more I'm learning, I'm like the social determinants of health, which include things like your social life, your job, where you're living, like all of this adds into a healthy person, because health isn't just physical health. I think mental health is hugely important. And we've learned that as of COVID, so many people have had their mental health brought to the forefront of their minds. There's arguably a reason why, yeah, having a few beers and some pizzas with your mates, that could be so much better for you than your 7th gym session of the week.
Yeah. And you know, if it's going to be me, as like even as a personal trainer, if it was going to me, I'd take the beer and the pizzas, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's about having those beer and pizzas without the mentality of, well, I'll burn this off tomorrow.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Overcoming that mindset is another hurdle, which can be difficult to overcome if you've grown up thinking that, you know, food or exercise is there to be endured and as punishment for something you've eaten.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. What is the biggest thing your clients tend to struggle with, do you find, or is there different?
I think the big one, people kind of say to me, I get it. I get what you're saying. I get that diets don't work because, you know, I've got years of experience of dieting, but I still want to lose weight. They're like, I understand what you're saying about intuitive eating. I totally get that it would be more freeing, but that urge to lose weight is still there within me. And I think that is something that's quite common in the majority of my clients, I think.
Yeah. And do they struggle letting go with kind of structure of having to do it a certain way? Is that kind of a problem as well? Like, it's intuitive. Actually, will you explain intuitive eating? Because I know it is, but maybe other people.
Sure. I mean, I think I'll come on to the intuitive eating part in a minute, but to answer your first question, like you said, you mentioned, like, we grew up in the 90s where that skinny, stick thin body was like the goal and the dream. And if that's what you've had in your mind, that one day, if I can just find the right diet, if I can just find the right exercise, that will be my body. When you finally come to terms with the fact that you're never going to achieve that body, it can be a bit of a mourning period and a bit of a, like, you have to deal with the grief. And it sounds really over dramatic, but it is a grieving process, that you're not going to have what you have deemed as the perfect body for so long. So that can be really, really tough for people. And it's something that you kind of have to go through and make peace with, the same as you would with grief of any other kind, I think. So does that answer the first part of your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense the way you say it. Because yeah, if, like, say for instance, if you spent 20 years going, I'm gonna look like this if I get the right diet, and then you have to come, yeah, like, it's definitely, there would be a grieving going, no, you're never going to look like that. But that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're a failure as a person. It just means it's not meant for you, like.
Exactly. But if you've had that in your mind, that this is what I like, that it was actually working with a personal trainer a few years back that I had that realization, because, you know, I went to him and described what I'm sure you get this with women that come to you. I was like, I just want to be toned, like I need to lose a bit of weight. Yeah,
I don't want to get bulky.
Yeah, I just want to get a bit toned, like maybe have a 6-pack. And he looked at me and he was like, Bex, I'm going to be totally honest with you. You will never have a 6-pack. And I was like, obviously horrified, because I'm like, I'm paying you to deliver this 6-pack to me. But he was like, you will have to give up so much in your life in order to achieve that. He was like, look at women that compete in bikini competitions. Like, that's the fear, I guess, when people come to you and say, oh, I don't want to get bulky. They've got these women that compete in bikini competitions or bodybuilding, and they think that just lifting a few dumbbells, like, that's going to have that body. It's like, these women train and eat so well for like 9 months of the year. They don't put a thing wrong past their lips. They stick to their routines. and you really give up your life in order to achieve this body. He was like, it's just not going to be worth it. You're going to have to give up your social life, you know. Like at the time I was quite partial to, like, I love a glass of wine or a gin. He was like, that needs to go. Any kind of bad, in commas there, bad food that you enjoy needs to go. Like, you are just never going to achieve this 6-pack goal of yours living a life that you enjoy. And that was a real like slap in the face to me. But he explained it in such a way, and we had more conversations about this, that it kind of had me have the realization that actually life is about so much more than what your body looks like, and enjoying your life. So yeah, that was kind of how that realization came to me. And sometimes delivering it to other people, it is as blunt as that. But once you can make peace with that fact and move on, like, I promise you, it's so worth it, because the freedom that you get on the other side is amazing. So yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. I've changed over a couple of years and stopped worrying about weight and stuff like that. And it's just like, sometimes I like to ask people, how much do you think I weigh? And it's always way lower, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, exactly. And like, no one can, even if, when I say to people, why do you care about your weight? It's like, you don't care about your weight. You don't care about the number. What you care about is fitting into your favorite pair of jeans, or the fact that your husband won't have sex with you at the moment, or the fact that you can't run around after your kids without getting out of breath. Like, that's what you care about. You don't care about the number on the scale.
No, the number scale actually means nothing, because like that, you could still be the same weight and you could be able to run around with your kids, or your jeans could look even better, or you could gain weight and your jeans could be hanging off you.
Exactly. Like, the number is irrelevant. It's how you feel and the way you can live your life. That's the important things.
Yeah, it's just been bet into us for so long that you shouldn't be a certain, and obviously the BMI thing doesn't help, and that's
don't even get me started.
Do I feel a rant?
Yeah, no need. I think the BMI thing's been done. But we shouldn't go down there.
No, go for it. Like, I love a good rant.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, BMI, it was not designed, as I'm sure you well know, to measure the general health of a population. It was designed for one guy to measure, I think it was to measure men for one particular thing. And yet it's used, like, in the NHS for pretty much everything, you know, access to certain like fertility treatment, for example. If you've got a BMI of over 30, then you're not eligible for fertility treatment on the NHS. And I'm very deep into the fertility world at the moment, because my husband and I are trying for a baby. So I see these heartbreaking stories of women who have always been in larger bodies, and yet suddenly they're being told they're not eligible for treatment because of this. And they can be super healthy, you know. We've all heard of athletes, rugby players or Olympians that do certain events that from a BMI perspective they're classed as critically obese, and yet they're actually, like, they could run circles around most normal people, you know. So yeah, BMI does no one any favors, really.
Yeah, that must be heartbreaking as well, when you're saying about the fertility, like, and trying to get it, and they're being told, like, sorry, basically you're too fat to have a kid.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm very privileged because I'm in a smaller body, but going to a doctor, you know, like, if I go to a doctor because I've broken my leg, the doctor's not going to question it. They're going to treat me for a broken leg. Whereas if someone in a larger body goes to the doctor with a broken leg, the doctor will say, well, you wouldn't have fallen if you weren't in such a large body. You know, losing weight would help this not happen again. So you get discriminated against every way you turn if you're in a larger body. And it's really nothing. It's just your genetics and your genes and the biology that you were kind of born with that dictates. Of course, food and exercise plays a part, but it doesn't play a part to the extent that we are led to believe.
Yeah. And then, as I said, this kind of mentality fuels guy culture.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Poor women like you are like, I just want to lose weight.
Exactly. It comes full circle.
Yeah. In intuitive eating, can you explain that?
Sure. So intuitive eating, I use an intuitive eating framework throughout all the work I do with my clients. And it actually, when you think about it, it's mad that we need a framework to eat intuitively. Like if you think about a little kid, like a newborn baby, they obviously like they're fed formula or breastfed for like 6 months, and then you wean them off into like proper food. Like a baby doesn't sit in its high chair and count its calories or its macros or weigh up how much carbs it is. Like if you give, like my friend's got a little boy and I think he's like 6 months old, she puts down a little plate in front of him with like a few chicken strips and blueberries, a bit of avocado. He'll eat what he wants to eat, and then when he's full he starts smushing it in his hair or like putting the blueberries up his nose or whatever, because he's done eating, because the kid knows he's had enough. And yet we as adults that have been conditioned through diet culture, and it starts from such a young age, like even younger now, like think about, like I was really into my dolls and my Barbies and stuff when I was a kid, but you never got a Barbie in a large body. They were all like standing like fact that if a Barbie was a real woman, she wouldn't be able to stand up because she'd be too top heavy. And yet you're given this doll that is symbolized as the perfect example of a woman. So diet culture starts from such a young age. Even, you know, we hear maybe our mums or our aunts or our older sisters talking about food or their bodies, and we start to learn or start to believe that we should be controlling our food or we should be controlling our weight. And this idea that if you're not in the so-called perfect by society's expectations body, then at least you should be striving to be there. You should at least be trying to be there. So and as a result, we turn to diets, we turn to apps, we turn to plans, we turn to other people to tell us what to eat and when to eat it. We stop trusting ourselves, you know, we stop trusting our own ability to eat when we're hungry, stop when we're full, and eat foods which are going to be, in the most part, physically nourishing. So intuitive eating is really a 10-step process to get back to that way of eating that we all had when we were toddlers, when we first started learning to eat, whereby we do observe our body's own hunger and fullness signals, so we know what to eat when we want to eat it, and in the main choose largely nutritious foods, which is going to support our body to be as healthy as it possibly can be.
Yeah. It sounds so straightforward, but I know, like, but it's not, like, do you know what I mean? Like even simple things like listening to your hunger and fullness cues, like how many times in your life have you point blank ignored them?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, for so many people, when I start working with them, the idea of being hungry is terrifying to them because they don't know what that feels like, and they worry that if they allow themselves to get hungry, well, they're going to turn to all the foods like the chocolate, the crisps, the sweets, the so-called bad foods that they've been restricting from their life for so long. They're going to binge on them if they've not got rules and restrictions in place. So I totally understand how it's really difficult to suddenly not be told, you know, like if you're following a diet plan, you're told, you know, 7 o'clock, wake up and have a glass of water. 8 o'clock, have a 2-egg white omelette with a handful of spinach. Like 10 o'clock, have this. And you're literally dictated what to eat and when to eat it. So you don't even think like, am I hungry now? Is this going to satisfy me? You just eat what the plan tells you to eat. So suddenly not having that and having to kind of make these decisions yourself, it can feel incredibly overwhelming, which is why there's a process in place which not only deals with the physical side of eating and the physical hunger fullness cues, but a huge part of intuitive eating deals with the emotional side of food. And eating, you know, eating during COVID, we've all experienced this, eating because we're bored, eating because we're lonely, eating because there's nothing else to do. If you remove the food as an emotional eating tool but don't replace it with anything else, that's a huge void to leave in someone's life. So a big part of intuitive eating is putting coping mechanisms in place for the emotional side that perhaps you've used food to deal with in the past.
Is there any kind of particular tactics that help clients, like those coping mechanisms, or is it really like variant to variant?
I think the big one I like to work on, it sounds really woo-woo, but I love a bit of woo sometimes. I like to put together with clients like an emotional toolkit that they can use throughout the day. So, I mean, you're in the kind of coaching and fitness world, so you're probably familiar with certain things of this yourself, but simple things such as, you know, could I phone a friend for 10 minutes rather than reaching for the snack cupboard? Could I maybe, like, I'm a big fan of journaling. Some people love it, some people loathe it, but journaling, meditation, I get like it's eye rolly, but there's a reason why just sitting with yourself and being quiet, it can really work wonders. Could you just read a book? Or, you know what, perhaps right now that slice of chocolate cake is exactly what you need to deal with whatever is going on with you right now. So I like to work on preparing like an emotional toolkit of kind of simple things that like people say, oh, I'd run a lovely hot bubble bath and relax in that for 20 minutes. Well, that's great until you're in your office at the middle of the day. Like, you can't do that. So putting together an emotional
sorry.
yeah, exactly. Whereas perhaps you can excuse yourself to go to the bathroom and just sit quietly with your thoughts for 5 minutes or something. So I think an emotional toolkit, like sleeping enough, is a huge one. Like, are you getting enough sleep is massive. So putting together an emotional toolkit of things that you can use when you would normally turn to food automatically, so you can have it actually there. And I do go as far as like write it out and print it off and stick it somewhere where it's like, maybe it's in your workspace or in your bedroom, wherever feels right for you. So because when you're feeling a feeling which feels very emotional and quite raw, and you would normally turn to food to cope, probably the last thing you want to do is mentally think, well, what could I do? Whereas if you've got this whole list written out, it's easy to look at that list and be like, you know what, actually reading a book for 10 minutes, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to phone a friend, or whatever might be helpful for you in that moment.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Had you get much pushback on that, or did people kind of go, they've been kind of, say for instance, suffering with the diet thing for long enough that they're ready to just go, no, I'll try anything to stop doing this?
Yeah, I think I'm lucky in the messaging that I put out there, and when I talk to clients, you know, no one comes across my website and is like, her, that's exactly who I need, like, I'm going to sign up and work with her. Like, generally when I work with clients, they've been following me for a while, they've maybe been in my Facebook group, so they've been listening to my message, so they kind of know what they're signing up for, and they're at a point where they're like, I know that diets don't work, I need to make this change for myself. So generally, I think people are receptive to putting in some changes. So I haven't had an experience yet where someone is totally pushed back. I think I did have one lady who booked in for a discovery call with me, and she wanted to go totally vegan, like completely plant-based. And I actually said to her, like, I'm not the coach for you, because this is not what I do. And she looked a bit shocked. But I was just like, from an integrity point of view, like, I can't be there talking about like, eat whatever you want whenever you want it, and living this non-diet approach, and then at the same time be coaching you to be totally vegan. Like, it's just not going to fit in my messaging. So I think, in answer to your question, like, when I work with clients, generally they've been in my world for long enough and they've seen what I do, and that they're attracted to me because that's the kind of life they want.
Yeah. The lady now who was coming to you, do you think she was going vegan in a sense of it was kind of a new form of restriction? You know, like sometimes that can happen.
Oh, totally. I mean, and that's a big thing. I think we're like, I often get people that say to me, oh, I don't need your work because I'm not on a diet. You know, I just live a really healthy lifestyle. And then when you delve into it a bit, and it's like, so like, and you question it, it's like, well, I don't eat dairy because dairy's bad, dairy's fat, and I don't eat sugar and I don't eat gluten, but I'm not on a diet, I'm just really healthy. And it's like, but this is all restriction. Like, everything you're doing, unless you've got a genuine medical reason why you can't eat a certain thing, which actually is kind of few and far between, you know, in which case, of course, you're going to avoid that food. But yeah, I think it going plant-based, especially, it's like bang on trend at the moment, isn't it, to be plant-based? And that can totally be used as a form of restriction.
I have a friend who has restriction issues, and I was vegetarian for the first part of the year. I don't have any reason. There was no restriction involved. We just started it in January and kept going through the lockdown.
Mhm.
And then steak came back in my life. So but I was always very indifferent to it. I was like, I'm just doing it. I can't explain it. It just is. Whereas my friend's like, I'd love to go do that again. But right now, in the middle of a binge restrict cycle, I do not need to put any more restriction in my life. And I was like, don't you dare even try. You're right. You don't need any other rules right now. Like,
Yeah.
and it was good though that she identified it before she could send herself down it.
Yeah. But that
how-
binge restrict that you mention is so common. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see, whether it can be as simple as binge at the weekend, restrict during the week. Like that's a really, really common one that I see, especially with like younger clients that I work with. Or it's that binge restrict in the form of like dieting for a few weeks and then binging. Like it's a pattern that occurs over and over.
When you were mentioning about the ones being afraid of hunger because they turn into a binge, they're possibly already in that cycle without even realizing it, because they are just going hell for leather.
Exactly. And I get it, like, because that used to lead me as well. I would restrict all the foods that I considered to be bad. And then when I did inevitably cave, I would end up eating way past the point of fullness. Like I would just be like, totally binging on them, because in my head I'd be saying, well, this is never happening again. I'm never going to eat chocolate again or cake again or cereal again, whatever it was. So I definitely sympathize. And that can be one of the hardest things when people start intuitively eating, is inevitably, I try and explain it as a pendulum. Like our bodies want to be just a straight pendulum falling down in the middle. And if you imagine on one side of the pendulum, diet land, like you're knee deep in diets, you're restricting all the bad foods as you think of them, you're completely, eating in a really restrictive, controlled way. And you think on the other side, I call it donut land, where there's all your foods that you consider bad or naughty. If your pendulum is all the way into diet land, when you release, of course it's going to swing up into donut land. But if you just let it settle naturally, it will come to the point where it settles in the middle. But you have to go through the process and make peace with all those foods. And that can be really, really scary, which is why I think sometimes people find it help. I mean, you can read, there's hundreds of articles online about intuitive eating. You can read books about it. So by all means, if you feel you can go for it on your own, like go for it. But I think one of the reasons why having a coach to support you in that journey can be helpful is because the mindset shifts and the emotions that you'll go through can be a lot to deal with by yourself.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the other thing to remember for them is if they do have a, say, quote unquote slip up, whatever way you want it, like it wouldn't be a slip up, but that doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you're human.
Exactly. And intuitive eating, there is no such thing as failing or getting it wrong. It's we always are encouraging clients to come at it from a place of curiosity and compassion and learning. Like if you did binge on all your kind of bad or naughty foods last night, the next morning kind of try and look at that, like, why did I do that? What did I gain? How did I actually feel? Because over time you'll realize, well, it actually made me feel really lethargic and really full, and I didn't enjoy it. Like, of course, the first bite of like ice cream or chocolate cake, of course, it's going to taste amazing. But if you've then gone on to eat like 3 tubs of ice cream or the entire chocolate cake, can you honestly say that that last bite tastes as good as the first? Like, almost certainly not. So the longer the process of intuitive eating goes on, it's having that realization that actually the food that I'm eating, I can get satisfaction from that from a few bites rather than the whole cake. And realizing, well, if it's a few bites, then that's safe. I don't have to wait until a Saturday or wait until my birthday. Like if I want a few bites of chocolate cake on a Tuesday afternoon, it's okay to do that, because in doing that, I'm going to stop myself from binging on the entire cake come the weekend.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the thing as well is when, you're talking about tasting it, it's like you don't tend to taste it though when you're in that, you're inhaling.
Exactly. You're not chewing it, you're not swallowing it, you're not eating mindfully. You're just trying to get it in your face as fast as you can, because in your head you're thinking never again, this is never going to happen again. And almost like, I mean, I used to binge an awful lot, and in my head I'd be disgusted with myself while I was doing it, but that didn't stop me. But always in your head you have this thought of like, this will never happen again, like I'm not doing this again, you know.
I'm just getting it out of the house.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so I think that covers everything, Bex. I think that was really, really informative, and like your own story as well shows how much you can help people with these kind of issues. But I have one other question for you, and that is, what is the best advice that you've ever been given?
By anybody?
Yeah, you can pick more than one as well.
Oh, the best advice I've ever been given.
And it can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to what we're talking about.
Oh, that's a good question. You probably put this in the notes, and I should have reflected on this before now.
I put it away from the rest of the questions. It happened to another person I was interviewing today as well.
Best advice I've ever been given. I think. Oh, my mind's gone blank. Sorry.
You can pick more than one as well. You can pick more than one, because I know I've had people have 2 or 3 before. Normally at least 2.
I think a big one, I don't know if this was advice I was given or just a lesson I've realized, is that like I kind of touched on this earlier, like everything in life happens for a reason, and what is meant to be will be. I don't know if that was life advice, but my mum always used to say it to me when I was little, and I've definitely found that to be true as I've gone through life. Like something that happens which maybe feels very negative or really painful or really sore in the moment, it has come full circle, and it turns out that it's happened for the best, you know, such as the bike accident I had, such as losing my job. Although in the moment it's felt really raw, inevitably that has come full circle and either taught me something or I've gained something. So I don't know if that's advice that I've been given as such or something I just learned, but I would say a big one for me is everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That one has come up actually before with other people, and I used to think that was like, yeah, whatever. It was like on the Alex Nanny bracelets or something. I was like, so silly, and now I'm like, no, they make a point.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly found it to be true. It might be kind of a hard, even like, you know, I've been through a really tough year in my personal life with a couple of miscarriages this last year, which has been awful, but it's made my relationship with my husband so much stronger as a result. So even though it's been super painful, something good has come of it, you know. So I am quite a believer in everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. You can really can see the positive sides of stuff. Or you personally, what I mean is like, it's like that's something that you can even find something you wouldn't think you'd find something positive out of something like that. But
yeah, I think doing the work, working in the kind of coaching field and the, you know, wellness, health, I do an awful lot of personal development work, and as a result I think I'm able to look a bit more objectively on these things. Like, of course it's really tough at the time, but you know, if you go through these situations and you can learn from them, then it's not all been lost, you know, it's not all been for nothing.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So just before you go as well, everyone can still find me on Instagram, at TikTok, that is at Chrissy H Fitness. And I just want to thank you again for all of I want to thank you again for coming on today, Bex.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Where can everyone find you?
Sure, well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm just at Bex Brame. I have a Facebook group called Break the Diet Cycle with Bex, where I do live videos 2 or 3 times a week, covering off any aspect of dieting, of body image. I love to do those, and you can find me at my website, which is just bexbrame.com.
Lovely.
Thank you again for listening to the Why Not podcast. It really means a lot that you are listening in, and I would love if you could please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe on Spotify. And always, I'd love to hear feedback personally, so if you do want to leave me a message and let me know how you found the podcast, please do.